How did atheism begin? Atheism began in the 18th century AD, when a wave of reinterpretation of religious texts emerged in Europe, led by advocates of the Enlightenment and secularists. This is the most dangerous gateway to atheism, distorting the meaning of religious texts, leading them away from their true interpretation. This is the most damaging atheistic approach, because interpreting religious texts in a way that alters their meaning leads to doubt about the value of the text and the credibility of its meaning, making any personal understanding of the text unreliable. Atheism spread in the West when people lost trust in religious texts. By the way, this is exactly what is called Enlightenment advocates, and that's what we're trying to do with Islam today. They attempt to manipulate religious texts to weaken their significance in people's minds and distort their meaning. For example, you say, alcohol is anonymously prohibited. The atheist says, alcohol is permissible. Then the Enlightenment advocate comes in and says, I will reinterpret the religious text to make alcohol permissible. This is the Enlightenment project in our countries. In brief, it is the largest gateway to atheism. And this is how atheism first began in Europe. But until the 1700s, atheism, which is the denial of the Creator, had not yet emerged. Only a kind of rebellion against religion appeared. And the most famous anti-religious figure at that time was the French philosopher Voltaire. Voltaire, like other anti-religious advocates of the time, was not an atheist in the sense that we know today, only a rejection of Christianity of the Church. However, Voltaire did not mind explaining morality within the framework of religion to his servants. And he used to say his famous words, "If there were no God, my wife would cheat on me, and my servant would steal from me. If there were no God, my wife would have betrayed me, and my servant would have robbed me." The most amazing thing is that at the end of his life, he built a church near his palace, with the inscription at the entrance, "Lord, remember your servant, Voltaire." He claimed that this was the only church dedicated solely to God on earth, whereas all other churches were dedicated to saints. He would send his servants to church regularly and paid for their children to be taught religious principles. Thus, up to that date, atheism in its modern sense had not yet appeared. Then came the 19th century, where atheism began to be theoretically developed, and the foundational ideas that would shape atheism today were established. Economic atheism emerged by Karl Marx. He viewed economics as the only fundamental structure of society and believed that religion would eventually disappear in a communist society. Around the same time, Charles Darwin introduced the theory of evolution, in which he claimed that living organisms evolved from one another. After Darwin, a French sociologist named Émile Durkheim appeared. Durkheim attempted to provide an explanation why people adopt religion. He considered that religion emerged as a result of society and community, where clans shared a common title known as totem. This totem was often an animal name, and from this, according to Durkheim, religion originated. However, modern sociologists today recognize that Durkheim's ideas have been completely discredited. Entire nations, civilizations, and even whole continents have ever known anything about totems, nor do they have a system or animal-based titles. Yet despite this, they all clearly possess a belief in a supreme God. What is even more surprising is that it has recently been discovered that the totem in ancient tribes was actually an economic concept, not a religious one. The totem served as a national emblem and a symbol used to identify tribal lineage, functioning in a way similar to national flags used by countries today. The idea that society created religion is absurd. It is well known that religion is originally an individual phenomenon, a relationship between a human and their creator. How could collective consciousness create religion? Has anyone ever heard of a religion suddenly appearing and being immediately accepted by society? Or is it always the opposite? The common and repeated historical pattern is resistance to new religions and violent oppositions to their founders. Isn't this a well-documented and frequently observed historical fact? Furthermore, Durkheim's weak hypothesis fails to answer the fundamental question: where did the idea of supreme creator of heavens and earth come from? Which group or society supposedly fabricated this concept? And why have calls to believe in this supreme creator persist throughout all history, across geographies, through every era, and in the teachings of all prophets? Unfortunately, Durkheim's fantasies were taught in European universities for decades as if they were historical facts. Additionally, Durkheim's played a major role in distorting knowledge among Europeans. He misrepresented tribal ritual gatherings, which sometimes involved debauchery and forbidden acts, as a form of religious practice. However, it has since been proven that these ritual gatherings were actually rebellions against social and religious order and not an expression of religious devotion. Today, this has become one of Durkheim's most well-known deceptions. Tribal systems in all societies are based on strict separation between genders. However, in a strange twist, Durkheim portrayed rebellion against religion and debauchery into a religious manifestation. Through Darwin, Marx, and Durkheim, many false ideas infiltrated European mindset, leading to Tao and atheism. The beginning was with these figures, and the end will come with their imitators. By the 20th century, atheism became a tangible reality, and entire nations adapted Karl Marx's economic theories. Communism spread across Eastern Europe, Russia, China, Vietnam, Korea, Cuba, and other countries. Darwin's biological theories influenced Nazi Germany, leading to World War II, based on the concept of survival for the fittest and the extermination of weaker races. This gave rise to the idea of exterminating the subhumans, a term used to label and eliminate so-called inferior races. Yet, in spite of that, atheistic theories failed to survive. Nazism collapsed after exposing its ugly face of racism and its denial of human dignity within the atheistic ideology. Marxism fell, leading to the disintegration of the Soviet Union. Atheism proved completely incapable of understanding the human phenomenon. Human beings cannot be explained through these corrupt theories. As the 21st century began, atheism re-emerged in a completely new form. It falsely wrapped itself in a cloak of science, calling itself scientific atheism. It began reintroducing itself through new assumptions and speculations that are just as shallow and dangerous as the old ones. However, this new form of atheism uses the guise of science to seduce half-educated individuals and the younger generations. The purpose of these videos is to expose the reality of the new atheism and to critically examine the scientific claims it has disguised itself with.